Welcome to
Theories
of the third kind.
Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host that is joining us is Daniel's son.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we do have a couple of announcements to make.
If you would like to support the show, you can do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast. For just $6.66 a month, you can get our weekly premium audio episodes that are all ad-free and access to our entire back catalog as well.
Over 260 exclusive episodes are there just waiting for you to just slurp them all up. Or if you are a big baller and you want to spend a little extra change and see the video versions of those exclusive episodes, you can pay $9.99 a month and get access to those, as well as all the other bonus content that we have to offer. And to get access to that, just go to our website, theoriesofthethirdkind.com. Right there in the middle of our website, it's going to be a button that says Supercast. You click on it, it's going to take you over to it. It takes less than 30 seconds to hook everything up and get it all organized. Very easy to do, very easy to process. So if you want to, go do it.
We know things are tough out there right now, so if you can't afford a premium membership, but you still want to help us out, you could do so by leaving us a written review on iTunes or Spotify.
That helps us out a lot.
However, don't feel pressure to leave us one. If you don't want to, that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, Bigfoot, Sasquatches, Chupacabras, ghosts, Illuminati members, underground lizard people, whoever or whatever you are to enjoy the show. Also, remember, this episode is entirely human-made. No AI were harmed or abused, used in the process, except for the graphic for the base layer.
Yep, that is correct. And that is the end of the announcements. All right. So today's episode is Barry and Honey Sherman, the Billionaire murders. And how this episode will go today is we'll talk about who is Barry and Honey Sherman, pretty much from the start of their life, how they got married and their business ventures. And then we'll go into the actual murders themselves, which is very odd. And then we go into the investigation and then strange facts and findings, theories, and of course, wrap it all up with our own personal thoughts and theories. So with that being said, let's get into today's episode, where we first need to talk about who Barry and Honey were. So Dan, can you start that off for us?
Absolutely. So who were they? Well, first you have Bernard Charles Barry Sherman, who was a Canadian businessman and philanthropist, born in February of 1942. Now, Barry would graduate high school and go on to college at the University of Toronto, and then eventually would get a doctorate degree in engineering from MIT, which is Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
In the late 1960s, Barry would get his start in the pharmaceutical industry. Barry's uncle owned a drug company called Empire Laboratories, and Barry's uncle ended up passing away, in which Barry would then inherit Empire Laboratories.
Only a short time later, in 1971, Barry would marry a woman named Anna Deborah Reich Sherman, a.k.a. Honey. The couple would eventually have 4 children, one son named Jonathan, and 3 daughters named Lauren, Alexandria, and Kaylin.
Only 1 year later, in 1972, Barry would sell Empire Laboratories to the Canadian Operations of Publicly Traded International Chemical and Nuclear Corporation of California, also known as ICN.
Now, a little knowledge nugget for you. Barry had 4 cousins who were all supposed to have received a 5% stake in the business. The cousins sued Barry over the selling of the Empire Company, but were unsuccessful, so they didn't get shit.
2 years later, in 1974, Barry would form a pharmaceutical company that he called Apotex, Inc. This company, Apotex, began with limited staff in a 10,000 square foot warehouse.
Now, during the first few years, the company was losing so much money that his wife urged him to close his business before he lost everything. However, Barry continued to operate his company, and 6 years later, in 1980, Apotex was the first company to market a generic version of propranolol.
Close enough. What is that drug?
That is a blood pressure drug, which boosted Apotex company profile.
Yep. And by the mid-1990s, his company was earning $700 million in annual sales, which allowed it to control approximately 40% of the Canadian generic drug market.
Now, by 2016, Apotex grew even larger. It was one of Canada's largest drug manufacturers with over 260 products selling in over 115 countries and had a revenue of over $2.7 billion a year.
It's a lot of cheddar.
Hell yeah. Then Barry would end up having a net worth of $3.2 billion and at one point was one of the wealthiest men in the world.
Yeah, I think in the ranking, he was like number 13 or 14.
Damn.
Which $3.2 billion now, it's a lot of money. But you look at freaking Elon, he's up there in almost $500 billion. It's crazy. Now, even though Barry was extremely wealthy, he would often drive his cars until they reached to the point of not being able to be repaired anymore. It was so bad that one of the cars that Barry owned, which was a Ford Mustang, was so decrepit that it was leaking carbon monoxide into the cabin of the vehicle.
For Barry's 50th birthday, his wife Honey purchased him a brand new red sports car and placed a bow on it. However, in front of all the guests at his birthday party, Barry asked his wife to take it back to the dealership, in which Honey did, which that was also a brand new Mustang. He's like, nope, I like mine.
I like mine because I like to get a little carbon monoxide poisoning on my way to work and way back home.
Gets him a little lightheaded on the way to work so he doesn't think too much.
Yeah. Now, even though Barry was frugal with his money, he did donate it. Barry and his wife have donated millions of dollars to different charities over the years.
For example, in 2007, the Apotex Foundation donated over $50 million worth of medicine to disaster zones. Also, Barry was known to personally loan money to Apotex employees who needed financial help.
Now, another thing that you need to know about Barry is that he was a workaholic. Even though he would be regularly socializing at events with his wife, Honey, she was the more outgoing one at these events, while he would often keep to himself and would really only discuss business matters. Also, on the winter weekends, he would take his entire family to spend time at a ski club. That's what the rich people do. However, while Honey and his kids would be out on the trails skiing, Barry instead would stay inside of the lodge and go over work documents.
That's when you know you're too rich.
Yeah.
You go skiing, but you actually don't go skiing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going skiing, aka I'm going to go sit in a lodge and look over work documents. Must be nice.
Must be nice.
Yeah.
Now, Barry also had his hand in a bunch of different businesses that weren't pharmaceuticals. However, the majority of them would turn out to be fraudulent schemes to get money. For example, Barry would put money into a yacht chartering company, which turned out to be a fake company that had never bought any yachts.
Barry would also buy a majority stake holding in a company that sold nutritional supplements, which this company was run by an American named Kevin Trudeau. In 1996, United States regulators would investigate Kevin over fraud claims, which led to him being put in prison. And due to this, Barry lost a lot of money.
Following that, Barry would partner with Frank D'Angelo, who was a fruit juice maker at the time, but wanted to branch out to other businesses. Barry and Frank produced the Cheetah Power Surge energy drink and also started Steelback Brewery together.
Cheetah Power Surge energy drink. What a horrible name. Hey, you gonna go get a Cheetah Power Surge?
I feel like that's like a drug dealer's way of making Cheetos with the soda Surge back in the day.
That soda was good.
That was good. They should bring it back.
They brought it back for a few years, and then they took it back away from us.
And they talked about bringing it back again, but...
Yeah. Oh, well. So after opening up a few businesses with Frank, he would give him some funding to make a film. However, in 2007, Frank and Barry's businesses went bankrupt, and Barry lost over $100 million. Shortly after that, Frank would be arrested for charges of sexual assault and obstruction of justice. However, those charges were later dropped in 2009. And after that, Frank would go on to produce 8 films, all which were financed by Barry. And by the way, when I said that Frank and Barry's businesses went bankrupt, that does not include
just Barry's own personal
that he had with Frank, not Barry's pharmaceutical company.
Okay, so only ones that were with Frank.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have a picture of Barry and Honey Sherman for everyone to take a look at. Typical billionaires, you know? Just out there looking like billionaires. He looks like somebody that I can't put my finger on.
Reminds me of a guy off of like Ocean's 11.
Yeah, that's probably it. All right, so that right there is who Barry and Honey Sherman are. It gives you a good understanding of the business he ran and the wealth that he accumulated over the years. Now, we're going to get into the main part of today's episode. The night or day of the murders.
Dun, dun, dun. So, on December 15th, 2017, Barry and Honey Sherman would be found dead in their home in Toronto. Hanging from belts on the railing of their indoor pool, there were no immediate signs of a break-in or struggle, so the police initially thought it was a murder-suicide. After the autopsy, though, it was clear that they had both been murdered.
Now, in the events leading up to the murder, Barry and Honey were planning to sell their home, and Honey was preparing for a vacation in Miami, and Barry was going to join her a week later. He's like, you go there, I got some business I got to do, I'll join you a week later. Now, on the afternoon of December 13th, which was 2 days before, they would be found dead. So on December 13th, the Shermans would meet with a builder in Barry's office to discuss designs for a future home. And this would be the last time they were seen alive.
In the evening, Barry would send a routine email to his team at Apotex, though the following day he wouldn't show up, therefore breaking his usual routines. Now, at the same time, Honey would make a brief call to a friend at 6:21 p.m. that evening. That would be the last anyone ever heard from her.
In the morning of December 15th, real estate agents would arrive at the home to show it off to potential buyers, their current home that they were living in because they were selling it and building another home. And the Shermans, Barry and Honey, were not supposed to be in the home that morning. Realtors that were showing off the home had a key to a lockbox and let themselves inside for the potential showing of the home.
Do you know how much the home that they were building was costing?
No, I think it was like, what, $7 million?
$25 million.
Huh.
And
Well,
the richest part of the area, and they were selling this one for $5 million.
Okay, must be nice.
Must be nice. So the realtors were showing around some potential buyers, and it was a nice and great home. Fancy, mansion, $5 million. $5 million worth.
Yep.
But the realtors were like,
wait, you haven't even seen the best part of the house yet. There's an indoor pool in the basement. And we have a picture of it. Boom, there you go. Indoor pool in the basement with a hot tub.
That's pretty fancy.
That is fancy.
So the realtors led the buyers downstairs to the basement to show them the pool. But to their shock, they would also find Barry and Honey dead, hanging by their necks from the pool railing. At first, it wasn't immediately clear whether they were dead or alive.
I'm not laughing at the fact that the couple was dead. I'm laughing at the fact that the realtors were like, you haven't seen the best part of the home yet. Let me go show you the pool. Takes them downstairs and they're like, hey, whoa, that's not supposed to be there. The couple were both fully clothed and were in a semi-seated position. One of the real estate agents even stated that she initially thought the Shermans were doing some kind of weird yoga. He walked in and saw them in a seated position with a belt coming off the railing around their necks. And they were like, he was like,
oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. Wait, are you guys okay? Oh my God.
What's even scarier, though, is that the couple seemed to have been posed in a way that resembled a pair of life-size sculptures that the couple had in their basement.
Which we do have a photograph of those sculptures right there for you to take a look at.
Yeah, I would not have that in my house.
No.
Which the couple was placed next to each other just like these, Honey with one leg bent and the other slightly stretched out, and Barry with one leg crossed over the other. Exactly like those sculptures.
Yeah.
What are they even made of?
They look like parts of signs. You know those metal signs?
Oh, yeah. At first I thought it was like fruit for their head, but...
Yeah, like welded signs. That's odd.
Art.
Yeah. So the real estate agents found Barry's gloves and the paperwork for the house inspection near the door between the basement and the garage, which suggested that he had made it home, but was soon interrupted by someone. Honey's phone was found in a bathroom that she had barely ever entered, which to the police suggested that she used it to hide and try to call for help before getting killed. A window had also been left open to allow a recently painted room to air out, and a basement door was unlocked, as apparently the Shermans frequently left it unlocked.
That's when you know you live in a rich area. You can leave your doors unlocked.
Yeah. Not around here. Somebody got their car stolen at Planet Fitness. We'll talk about that during free talk.
It's getting bad.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the police were called. Post-mortem examination showed the cause of both deaths was ligature neck compression, which is ligature strangulation caused by binding or tying. And ligature strangulation is usually distinguished from hanging by the strangling force being something other than the person's own body weight.
The deaths were treated as suspicious, and the Toronto Police Service Homicide Squad took the lead in the investigation. Toronto police originally told the news media that there was no indication of forced entry into the Sherman home and that their investigation did not include a search for any suspects.
However, the police quickly changed their story and stated that they were probing the possibility that the case was a murder-suicide. The police also stated that Honey suffered face injuries and Barry did not, fueling their speculation that Honey was the victim and Barry was not.
Following that statement from the police, the Sherman children issued a statement urging the police to conduct a thorough criminal investigation and chastise the police for bringing up a murder-suicide theory. The Sherman children also contacted Toronto lawyer Brian Greenspan to retain a private investigator to look into the deaths.
So they were trying to say it was like a Crispin Wall?
That is what the Toronto police were kind of hinting at, like, hey, it might have been a murder-suicide. And Barry's children was like, no, it's not. We're going to hire a lawyer to get a private investigator.
So Brian Greenspan hired Tom Klett, a retired Toronto police detective who has worked in the homicide, drug, and intelligence bureaus. The family also hired Dr. David Chason, the retired chief forensic pathologist for Ontario, to conduct another autopsy. The second autopsy established that the couple's cause of death was homicide.
A month later, in January of 2018, the Toronto Star published an exclusive report, and this was based on an anonymous report from the family's investigative team who said that the deaths were murders, and the couple was strangled by belts after their hands were tied. Now, when contacted by a reporter, a Toronto police spokesman reiterated that they were treating the deaths as suspicious. So this anonymous source from the family's investigation team leaked to the Toronto News, the Star News, the media pretty much, that, hey, the deaths were a murder because the couples were strangled by belts and their hands were tied, which was not previously told to the public. So then a reporter went to the Toronto police and said this, and the only thing they said was, we're, treating the deaths as suspicious.
Oh, that is pretty suspicious.
Yeah.
So on January 26, Toronto police advised the news media that their investigation concluded that the couple had been killed in a targeted attack. At the time, they would not discuss any possible suspects, but planned to interview everyone who had access to the home prior to the deaths via the lockbox that was previously installed by the real estate agent.
The police investigation has encountered resistance at Apotek's headquarters, with a police spokesman saying legal complexities and some executions have been challenging, given the nature of Barry Sherman's businesses, in particular the search and seizure of electronics in Barry Sherman's workspace at Apotek's. So basically, what this paragraph stated is that the police tried to go get Barry's electronics, his business, like computer, laptop, and all that stuff. And Apotek's was like, whoa.
That's company.
That's company stuff. You ain't going to get it. Sorry. Which is very odd.
Very odd. Following that, the investigation continued, and then in September of 2018, detectives obtained 7 search warrants in addition to the 21 previously obtained. Detective Dennis Yim told a court that investigators are methodically reviewing material and pursuing different investigative avenues.
In late October of 2018, which was a month later, lawyer Brian Greenspan, which the family had, obtained, he announced that the family had offered a $10 million reward in Barry and Sherman's homicide investigation for any information that leads to the arrest and prosecution of a suspect. At the same time, the lawyer complained about the police investigation, claiming that it had failed to collect important evidence.
Police Chief Mark Saunders later told the news media that a forensic pathologist has been working on the case, in addition to over 50 officers, interviewing 200 witnesses, and collecting over 2,000 hours of video surveillance from neighboring homes.
So it sounds like the family's lawyer and the police were kind of getting into it, butting heads.
Because they weren't making any headway, pretty much.
Yeah. So almost a year later, on April 25th, 2019, the Toronto police said that they had a, and I quote, working theory of the case and an idea of what happened. But nothing ever came of that statement. At the end of 2019, the private investigators working for the family closed their investigation.
The following month, Star reporter Kevin Donovan, who had just published a book, The Billionaire Murders, about the case, disclosed that investigators had revised their timeline of the case. While previous statements had suggested police believed the couple had been killed early on December 15th, they now said that the murders had occurred 2 days earlier, within hours of the Shermans returning home on the night of the 13th.
In April of 2022, Toronto police said that the case was unfortunately old, still in the investigation phase, and no charges have been filed against anyone. The Toronto police asked the court to seal case documents from the press to protect the integrity of the investigation.
In December 2022, their son increased the reward to $35 million, and as of today, the murders of Barry and Honey Sherman are still unsolved.
And that is the story of the Barry and Honey Sherman billionaire murders. However, just like every week, our episode does not stop here, because now we are going to get into the strange facts and findings that we uncovered while researching this topic. So, Dan, do you want to start off with the first one?
Of course. So our first strange fact and finding is called suspicious questions. So we put together a list of questions related to this murder, and we are going to go over those, or a few of them at least.
Yeah. So the first question is, the bodies were found in the pool area, an area without working cameras. Now, these cameras were still mounted, so why would the criminals still do the crime in full view of them unless they knew they were not working? There were cameras in the pool area. The cameras were not working. Why would the criminal go inside there and do all the stuff to the two individuals, not knowing whether the cameras worked or not? That tells me that the criminal knew the cameras did not work.
Or they didn't know.
They didn't see the cameras.
Or no, they didn't know that they weren't working, and they wanted people to see.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Theories, personal thoughts later on. Question number 2. How did the criminals know the victim's schedule? Well, apparently it changed the day of the murder, as the meeting in a different town concerning their new house was a last-minute change. So how the hell did they know? Unless they caused it.
Yeah. Question number 3. Honey apparently was influenced into going into an upstairs washroom, and she also had facial injuries, and then dragged downstairs into some utility room opposite of the pool room, where she was detained or killed there. Also, another thing is that she had a habit of parking her car in the driveway. Her phone was found upstairs in that washroom by the maid the next morning. Barry came home and parked in their underground garage, and that was his usual practice. How did the criminals know that Barry would enter through that door that was near the pool and utility room? It's obvious the criminals were laying in wait in this utility room waiting for Barry. How could they predict which entrance Barry would use? Did they beat this information out of Honey, or did they already know the answer?
Oh.
Yeah.
Question number 4. A back door was apparently found unlocked. Why would only this door be unlocked? The front door was unlocked by a real estate agent, so we know that was locked. But why did they
leave that door unlocked, the back door? Makes no sense.
Unless Barry just gets tired of opening the door.
Yeah. Question number 5. The path taken in and out of the house by the criminals seems as if it was planned and executed with great skill to avoid observation. Obviously, the crime had to happen at night, is what a lot of people believe. How could the criminals predict the Shermans wouldn't have, guests visiting them at the time, or any of their staff would have been at the house? They had to have known their schedule that day and where they would be at. and when they would be coming home.
That's true. They did have maids, but they knew the schedule of the maids as well then.
Yeah.
Question number 6. The second coroner found that both victims had their wrists bound, yet when the bodies were found, there was no evidence of the bindings at the scene. So they removed them and took them before they left. Why worry about that unless you had a plan to make the scene look like a murder-suicide? Why not pull up the jackets after? The police were quite stupid to believe someone could pull their own jacket down all the while hanging yourself. The physical gymnastics involved from an elderly man to successfully do that is beyond belief, honestly.
They believed he beat his wife, dragged her down there, killed her, and then hung her up, and then positioned herself, and then he did the same thing to himself, hung himself up with the thing, and then positioned himself.
That makes no sense, because
Doesn't.
if he was hanging himself, I'm pretty sure he would start trying to get out of it. So I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be in the perfect position as the sculptures.
All right. So with those 6 questions being asked, we can all assume that the crime took planning and required some type of intelligence to pull off. From that, we can conclude that the Shermans were under observation for a while, or the criminal or criminals had inside information. However, that's a theory, and we're going to save that theory for our theory section.
That's right.
So with that being said, let's go on to our next strange fact and finding.
All right, so our next strange fact and finding is called political. Later on in his life, Barry Sherman was targeted by the Canadian wing of the Jewish Defense League, a group on the FBI's terror watch list, and had been sued by Israel's largest generic drug maker, Teva.
At the time of his death, Sherman legally was registered as a lobbyist, and he was also under investigation because of a fundraiser he had held for Justin Trudeau in April of 2015. Sherman filed a lawsuit in May of 2016, attempting to quash the investigation before it was finished. This was a legal, unprecedented move in Canadian history. Like, no one had really done that before. And if Barry would have been proven guilty to the fundraiser or doing illegal fundraising, then he would have been banned from lobbying for 5 years. But he ended up dying. So they were like, we can't ban him because he's dead.
I mean, you could still ban him.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about this next strange fact and finding, which is a short one.
All right. So according to documents released by the court in January of 2022, Barry owed $1 billion to other companies leading up to his death, which he pretty much said he was not going to pay, and he deuced out anyways.
Yeah. That's a lot of money to owe.
That is a lot of money to owe. I mean, he'd still be fine.
Yeah. He would still have $2.2 billion.
Yeah.
All right. So our next strange fact and finding is about the 1996 DeFerro trials. So back in 1996, pick up sticks, there was a high-profile dispute that emerged between the Canadian pharmaceutical giant Apotex, Inc., and Dr. Nancy Oliveira, a hematologist at the Toronto Hospital for Sick Children. This conflict became one of Canada's most significant case studies in medical ethics, academic independence, and the influence of corporate interest in clinical research.
So Dr. Nancy had been leading a clinical trial on the experimental oral drug deferoprone, which was an iron chelation therapy drug developed by Apotex. This drug was being tested for its potential to treat thalassemia, a hereditary blood disorder that causes dangerous iron overload due to frequent blood transfusions.
The research was part of a collaborative effort between Apotex and the University of Toronto and affiliated hospitals. By early 1996, Dr. Nancy began observing troubling patterns among her patients. Some were showing elevated levels of liver iron, suggesting that the drug might not be as effective as initially believed.
I never thought about the iron levels going up higher when you get a blood transfusion.
Yep.
Now, concerned for patient safety, Dr. Nancy concluded that participants in the study should be informed of the potential risk and that additional research and regulatory review were warranted. Upon learning of her concerns, Apotex invoked confidentiality clauses in their contract and warned Dr. Nancy that disclosing adverse information about the drug would be considered a breach of agreement.
Wow.
Don't you tell them that this could hurt them.
Apotex ultimately terminated her involvement in the trials and threatened legal action. Despite these threats, though, Dr. Nancy proceeded to inform her patients, citing her ethical and professional obligations.
Now that's a doctor. That is a doctor, right? This decision placed her at the center of fierce controversy, drawing criticism from Apotex and raising tensions with institutional administrators. Then, to complicate matters further, Apotex had pledged a substantial donation to the University of Toronto, raising concerns about whether financial interests were influencing the university's and hospitals' responses.
Dr. Nancy was then removed from her leadership role in a key research program shortly after. Apotex didn't stop there. They escalated the situation even more when they filed a $20 million defamation lawsuit against Dr. Nancy, which in turn launched a countersuit and wrongful dismissal from her research post.
They know damn well she didn't have that money.
She did not have $20 million.
The dispute triggered widespread debate in the Canadian academic and medical circles, highlighting the systemic vulnerabilities in how research involving industry partners is conducted and governed. Once this all happened, the Canadian Association of University Teachers conducted an independent investigation and issued a report supporting Dr. Nancy.
The report goes on to criticize both Apotex's actions and the University of Toronto's failure to adequately defend academic freedom. CAUT labeled the case as an example of a researcher being silenced for upholding scientific integrity and prioritizing patient welfare.
Now, the Apotex Dr. Nancy conflict had, far-reaching implications, like it forced Canadian universities and research institutions to re-examine the ethical framework surrounding clinical research and to strengthen protections for whistleblowers and independent investigators.
Then confidentiality clauses in research contracts were scrutinized, and with a renewed emphasis on transparency, particularly when public health and patient safety are at stake. With all that being said, the case was concluded with a settlement favoring Dr. Nancy in terms of professional vindication and institutional support. Good on them and her.
Good on Dr. Nancy, but pretty much Apotex got away with making a little few minor changes in their contracts. And
what a bunch of pieces of shit.
Who cares about the patients, though?
Yeah. Pharmaceutical companies hate them.
Big pharma.
All right, so let's go on to our last strange fact and finding. Can you start that off first, Dan?
Yep. So this strange fact and finding is about Noah Schenkman, Honey Sherman's nephew, who was suddenly removed from the Sherman family trust shortly before the murders. According to reports, Noah had asked Honey for access to her credit card and used it to purchase expensive designer items. This seemingly minor act set off a wave of distrust within the family.
Well, yeah, he took her credit card and bought designer items.
Yeah, he said, I just need to go purchase some, accessories. Can I just borrow your card? Yeah, here you go. Being nice. He goes out and buys these high brand designer shit.
Dolce & Gabbana.
D&J, duh.
So Noah's mother, Mary, which is Honey's sister, was so alarmed by Noah's behavior that she considered it grounds for financial estrangement. She reportedly removed Noah from her own real estate portfolio and indicated that Barry Sherman had taken steps to remove him from the 2016 family trust that was worth hundreds of millions.
Which supposedly they were thinking it was up to $500 million
Jesus.
In that trust.
Must be nice to be born rich.
Yeah. In a letter written after Barry and Honey's death, Mary, Honey's sister, expressed deep suspicions about her son's motivations, writing, "Everyone in the house shares the feeling that you would throw us under the bus for the chance to get to the Shermans and their money." The fallout was severe. Supposedly, Mary and Noah have not spoken since 2019.
Damn. Wow. So that right there is our last strange fact and finding. And now we are going to get into the theories, as in who murdered Barry Sherman and Honey Sherman and why. So the first theory we have is hitman. This theory states that a hitman was hired, but then that poses the question of who and why. Now, some people say that a competitor in the pharmaceutical industry was the one that hired the professional hitman, as maybe just to get rid of the big guy over Apotex. But then that doesn't really make sense because they're just going to fill it with another person.
But that means someone else get money in their pockets.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're a competitor in the pharmaceutical industry of Apotex, it doesn't make sense to take out the head CEO or whatever. Unless you were part of the company that was owed $1 billion.
That's true.
Yeah.
Or that you're the company that actually has the name brand pill. Because
he
Apotex
made
was the generic.
Generic, yeah.
So he was probably undercutting people when they got tired of it.
Yeah. Another theory is that maybe an individual from a prior lawsuit had hired a hitman. So in 1996, after the Sherman's North York home was completed, following 5 years of construction, the couple was dissatisfied with the work done on it. In particular, they claimed that the garage, a structure with a tennis court on top, and a basement lap pool and hot tub was faulty. The Shermans called it a disaster. He and his wife filed 12 separate lawsuits against all of the contractors of the home. Ultimately, they would recover almost the entire estimated $2.3 million that it cost of building the house entirely, all through favorable judgments.
That's chump change to them.
Yeah.
But yet they still
did it. They had billions of dollars, but they would go and build this house for $2.3 million and then turn around and file lawsuits against all the contractors involved in it and get all of their money back, or majority of the money back. If I was a contractor, I'd be fucking pissed.
I would be too.
Maybe they all got together and hired a hitman. I don't know. So that right there is the first theory. Why don't you tell us about our next theory, Dan?
All right. So our next theory is that it was probably a family member seeking monetary gain or revenge. And the first family member could have been the son. 2 weeks before the murders, Barry Sherman asked his son, Jonathan Sherman, to repay him tens of millions of dollars that Jonathan had borrowed for his storage business. Jonathan explained this was to get his father through a difficult financial situation, and his father committed to future funding when Barry's finances improved. The two had a close relationship, both professionally and personally. Which, how much do storage businesses cost to actually get going? Because
I don't know.
Tens of millions of dollars?
And they cost, around $150 to rent out one?
I mean, depending on the size, one down the road, like $70 for a 10 by 10
a month. Man. God dang, tens of millions of dollars. Doesn't really sound like you got a storage business that's working.
Sounds like an apartment complex.
Yeah. All right. So the next theory is that it was possibly not the son, but it was maybe some cousins. So in 2011, Sherman's cousins, the Winter children, sued him for allegedly never paying them royalties and equity in Apotex, contending that he had used the proceeds from the 1972 sale of Empire Laboratories to create Apotex in 1973, and it was officially founded in 1974, but he created it in 73. His cousins sought a 20% interest in Apotex or damages of $1 billion. Barry responded by withdrawing millions of dollars in financial assistance to his cousins that he was providing. The Winter children contended that Sherman had offered the financial assistance in the first place in order to make the cousins dependent on him and to keep them from learning about their rights to the business. And this was an allegation that Barry denied. In September of 2017, an Ontario Superior Court justice ruled against the Winter children, aka the cousins, saying that the case was wishful thinking and beyond fanciful. At the time of the judgment, a lawyer for the cousins said they would appeal, though no appeal occurred, and Sherman died a few months later.
You know, if you go deep into this even more, you find out that the whole family's just fucked.
Yeah.
Hate to say it that way, but these cousins here, back when it was Empire Laboratories, and then now, well, I'll say now, but like a few years ago, it would be Barry's nieces and nephews that are wanting money now.
Yep.
Because he spoiled them and they're so used to it. And now they're like, oh, they passed away. We deserve money. So it's honestly, that theory right there fits the bill so well.
It does.
But we got more.
Yep.
The next theory is Frank D'Angelo is involved. And he was the guy that Barry and him had a bunch of businesses that all went Bankrupt?
Yep. And then he created 8 films that were all financially supported by Barry.
What kind of film?
I don't know. I just think like normal films, not pornography.
Frank definitely didn't want Barry dead, as Barry was his personal piggy bank, but Frank got Barry involved in one of his schemes that involved some not so good people, and Barry was probably killed for it.
Maybe. That's the theory, that Frank got, as his businesses became bankrupt, he wanted to make more money. So he started to get involved with some not so good people doing questionable things. And it got Barry involved as he was the financier. And then Frank was making all these promises to these bad individuals, saying, oh, yeah, I can provide the funding. Goes to Barry. Barry says, nope. And then Frank goes back to his people and we're like, oh, he said nope. So they went and maybe beat up Honey and then went to question Barry and then was like, fuck it, we're just going to kill him.
Wanted to make a statement.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about our last theory, which is called religious. So court documents released in January of 2022 included statements by Honey Sherman's sister, Mary, which is Noah's mom that we talked about earlier. These suggested that the person responsible for the murders was making a statement and that Mary believed the motives for the killings may have been for religious reasons. Mary stated the Shermans were strong supporters of Israel, and Honey was very vocal about being Jewish. There were a lot of people of certain ethnicity going through the house at a certain time, and Honey would use phrases that were not politically correct. Mary stated that 6 months before the murders, Honey had gone to a lecture about stopping money from getting into Muslim fundamentalists' hands. In Mary's statement to the police, she said Honey's belief was that if the money were to be cut off from Muslim fundamentalists, they could bankrupt them. Therefore, the money could not be used for terror. Mary told the police that she believed Barry was providing funding for this. Basically, to cut off funding from Muslim fundamentalists believing they were terrorists. What the fuck? Wow. That is a far out theory.
That is a very far out theory.
Yeah. But
this coming from the sister of Honey, who pretty much got millions and millions of dollars from Barry and Honey, saying that, God, I can't even go through with saying that shit.
Yeah.
It's dumb. I don't believe that one bit.
All right, Dan. So I'm going to make my statement what I believe, and then I'll come to you about yours.
All right, let me know what you got.
All right. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. It was not a murder-suicide. I believe they were both murdered. It is my opinion that they were both murdered and that they were murdered by somebody that was hired to murder them. Now, there was some police footage that was released, or not police footage. It was footage of some camera of a man in all black walking across the street after the murders had taken place. And it was a man wearing like a black ball cap and a black jacket and pants. So obviously it was a professional hit, and the person knew the schedule of the family. I think the individual that did the hit came in, got a hold of Honey, dragged her up, beat information out of her where Barry was and where he would be entering in, brought her down, waited for Barry. Barry came in. Of course, he wouldn't put up much of a fight. Look at him, right?
He's old. They're like 70s.
Yeah, old. Beat the shit out of him, killed him, set him up in a certain way to make a statement, and then left. And I think that type of murder was a hit for revenge of something. And you have so much shit going on with the family. I mean, Barry really fucked over a lot of people. In my opinion, he wasn't a good businessman that made ethical decisions. He wasn't a good individual when it came to things like that. Screwed over a lot of people, made a lot of enemies. And I think he made enemies with the wrong individual, and that individual eventually took him out. That's what I believe. Who was it? I have no idea. There's so many fucking possibilities as to who it could possibly be.
I think I might know who it may be.
All right, let me hear it.
I'm going to think it's Noah.
You're going to You're going to think it's Noah or you think it's Noah?
I think it's Noah.
Okay.
Okay. So he got pretty much bitched out by his mom, using Honey's credit card to go buy this expensive designer stuff. That shows that they've been spoiled all their life. They had all this money. After doing that, Mary, Noah's mom, cut him off from all of her, estate portfolio and all that stuff. It's like, you're not getting anything from us. Then Mary was just like, I'm going to go to the Shermans, your uncle and aunt, and make sure that you get nothing from them ever again. You're not even going to be involved in the trust after they pass away and such. Noah, knowing that, he's already knows that his mom has cut him off. He went to Honey and Barry, tried to talk to Honey.
Honey got pissed off, beat the shit out of her.
Then he would know their schedule.
Yeah.
He would know where the cameras were working or how to deactivate them. He lives there, probably. Yeah. So he waited for Barry, already had Honey tied up, got Barry, tied him up, begged him not do that. Then finally realized, oh shit, I've went too far.
Yeah, past the point of no return.
And then just
decided to finish it off.
Finish him off. And then he's like, I'll make it look like a crazy person try to do this or something.
Or it's like a murder-suicide.
Yeah, set them up like the sculptures and pretty much left.
Bind their hands up and then took the bindings off and set them up so it looked like a murder-suicide. Damn. And then he goes to his mom and be like, hey, I really fucked up. And his mom, not having talked to him and being upset with him, quote unquote, and then throws off the police by saying, oh, it could have been religious because they made these statements. It might have been, the Muslims that worked for him.
Oh.
The Mary covering for her son.
He didn't even have to actually ask them to not do it. If he killed them, they couldn't make any changes anyways.
Oh, yeah.
So pretty much having them look like a murder-suicide, his job was done. He just had to wait. And just wait for the trust to be undone because the trust is Jonathan, Barry's son, then Alexandria.
The 3 daughters?
I think there's only 3 people. It was Jonathan, Alexandria's husband, his name's Krawczyk.
Mm-hmm.
And then I forgot the other person. They're in charge, but supposedly now they don't even talk. So the trust is still there, hasn't even been touched yet.
Wow.
So it's in the Mary's 2 other kids are actually suing those 3 because they won't let them get any of the money yet.
Damn.
So it's it's a big money war going on between that family. And if Noah didn't get taken out of that trustee yet, he's just sitting there.
Just waiting. All right. Well, if you or a loved one know who killed Barry or Honey Sherman or Barry and Honey Sherman,
you better go tell the police.
Yeah, you better go collect your, $35 million?
$35 million.
And you better slide us, a couple bucks. That'd be great. But with that being said, do you have anything else you would like to add to today's episode?
After reading this, man, family problems, man. I thought I had it bad sometimes, but this was...
Yep. All right. Well, that is the end of today's episode. I want to thank you for joining us. And again, thank you for your support. Without you, this would not be possible.
That's right.
So with that being said, Dan, would you like to roll us out?
Sure will. It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.